2 weeks ago, we were just a fortnight away from getting married. She asked me to go to therapy with her, even though she was already seeing a therapist on her own. She wanted us to have a session together where we could be entirely open before the wedding. It felt a bit strange to me, since I thought we were already honest with each other. After all, we were about to get married in 2 weeks, right? Also, she was always quite private about her therapy sessions, never really discussing them. I'd never met her therapist before, so suddenly being invited felt a bit off to me. The day of the session came, and I decided to record the audio on my phone for my own protection. My fiancé was already there, and I had to wait about 20 minutes before they called me in. The therapist greeted me, shook my hand, and we exchanged some small talk. She commented that I wasn't at all like how my fiancé had described me, which I took as an attempt to compliment me. Then she looked at my fiancé and said, "This might be more challenging than we anticipated." That remark was unsettling, but I stayed calm, keeping a polite smile on my face as we do in awkward situations. The therapist gave a little speech that I didn't bother to remember, and my fiancé took my hand as the therapist began explaining that we live in a modern world, and my fiancé wanted us to have a non-traditional marriage. I smiled, not quite sure what she meant. I figured she wanted to discuss how she wouldn't be a submissive wife, that she'd continue her career and embrace modern ideals of womanhood, girl power, and all that. But no, what she actually meant was that once we got married, she wanted the freedom to sleep with other men. It was the other kind of non-conventional marriage. I guess I forgot it was 2018. She insisted she loved me deeply but wouldn't feel comfortable if I had the same freedoms, as it would break her heart knowing I found other women attractive. The idea that another woman might steal me away was too much for her to bear. I let them talk without interrupting. They seemed to get more comfortable and confident, likely because I wasn't reacting. It was clear they had rehearsed this conversation. When they finished, I asked the therapist if she was licensed. The question seemed to throw her off, as it wasn't the response she was expecting from me. She confirmed that she was. So I turned to my fiancée and told her why we wouldn't be getting married anymore and why our relationship was ending immediately. I wished them good luck and walked out of the office. Now I'm considering reporting the therapist, but I'm not sure if I should contact the clinic directly or report her to a professional board. I doubt their attempt to corner me was professional conduct, and I want her held accountable. To be clear, there was no scenario where this conversation could have ended positively. Even if she had suggested a completely open marriage where I could also sleep with other women, my response would have been the same. That's not a marriage, it's a farce. It's also starting to dawn on me that she may have already cheated, now that I have a clearer perspective on the situation. In hindsight, several things don't quite add up. I listened to the recording again, and it's still hard to believe what was said. In any case, I called off the wedding. I'm a pretty laid-back guy, and I don't look for fights or conflict. I try to live by principles and common sense, which might have led my ex to believe I'd be easy to manipulate, like a doormat. She was wrong. After listening to the recording multiple times, I'm convinced the therapist realized I wasn't as my fiancé had described me in their sessions, making this more difficult than they expected. People are now starting to ask questions that I'm uncomfortable answering since the wedding is off. How do I handle this situation? I'm sure my ex is doing damage control, but I still have the recording. If she strays too far from the truth, I won't hesitate to share what was actually discussed. However, my family and friends are demanding explanations, and I'm unsure what story to give them. I don't want them to think I'm a fool for allowing my ex to get to the point where she felt confident enough to tell me she wanted to sleep with other men. She's also been blowing up my phone, as well as the phones of my best friend and brother. She keeps saying we can work this out, that I misunderstood what was said in the therapy session. Now she's claiming it was the therapist's idea and that she was actually against it. This is nothing but the last desperate cry of a dying siren. All her pleas fall on deaf ears, my ears. We were also in the process of securing a loan to buy a house, but I canceled everything. I've severed all ties we had financially and otherwise. Her latest excuse is that in therapy, she shared her insecurities about our sexual histories. I had far more partners than she did, and the therapist allegedly came up with the idea to even the playing field. Regardless of the truth behind this, that therapist will be reported once I figure out how and where to do it. This post is mostly a rant, but I'd also like to hear how you would handle questions from friends and family. My ex is certainly spreading her own narrative, and I don't want to end up in a he said, she said scenario. I have the recording, and I'm debating whether I should share it with anyone who might be interested. Last Monday, I spoke with a lawyer at work about the therapist situation. He looked at me like I was joking and asked if this was some kind of prank, so I offered to let him listen to the recording. Absolutely, he said. I spoke with him again the following day, and he pointed out some things I hadn't noticed in the recording. The therapist always used phrases like "we think," "we want," and "we decided." Not once did she say, "Your ex asked me to talk to you," or "Your ex wants you to know." It was always framed as a collective we. He also asked about my end goal, whether I intended to sue. I told him I wasn't planning on suing, just reporting the therapist to the appropriate authorities and letting them handle it. We decided to draft 2 letters, one to the clinic where the therapist works and one to the APA, since we verified she was accredited. By Wednesday, a few more people at work knew about the situation, including one of the case researchers. She found reviews and contacted 2 of the therapist's former patients. The therapist didn't have great reviews, and the 2 patients we tracked down were more than willing to help after hearing the details. Their experiences were just as bad as mine. The letters grew to a substantial size, incorporating the signed accounts from the other 2 individuals along with my own description of how my ex's behavior changed after starting therapy and the detailed account of my session. Last Friday, I met with both sets of parents at my parents' house. My ex was there too, and more details emerged, which were added to the report. This week, we sent out the reports. On Thursday morning, the clinic called our office, likely to confirm whether this was a genuine issue or some kind of joke. We had a phone conversation with one of their lawyers, and after confirming the legitimacy of the call, someone in the background was overheard saying, "Well, crap." They assured us they are treating this matter very seriously. One of my colleagues at work speculated that they might have received other complaints in the past, but this could be the first one presented with such detailed documentation. Their letter also stated that they would report this issue to the APA, which might have added pressure and led to their swift response. I'm unsure what the outcome will be, but I consider my part in this closed. However, after speaking with the other 2 individuals who were also treated by this therapist, I sincerely hope at the very least there is an investigation. She seems unbalanced, with a definite agenda, as she also destroyed their relationships. For the record, one of these individuals was a woman. Then, on Friday last week, my parents called and asked me to stop by after work. When I got there, surprise, my ex and her parents were also present. My initial reaction upon seeing their cars in the driveway was to turn around and leave. This discussion was supposed to happen on my terms, but she tried to take control. That wasn't going to happen. My ex was waiting outside and looked fantastic, like the perfect girl you'd want your parents to meet. She told me her parents were there to speak with me and see if we could work things out. Either she hadn't told them what actually happened, or she gave them a version of the story they weren't entirely buying. She had a journal with her and mentioned that she started writing in it before beginning therapy, continuing up until that very morning. She said that if I read it, it would clear up all the confusion. I told her this wasn't a book club. I wanted to head inside and get this conversation started, but she asked for 10 minutes to speak with me privately before we talked with our parents. She kept handing me her journal and started crying. At that point, my sister and her sister appeared. They were already there and came out to see what was going on. I finally took her journal, went inside, said hello, and led my ex to the farthest corner of my parents' garden, which has a lot of trees and secluded spots. She had quit her job, claiming the stress was unbearable, leading to a breakdown that only got worse. She had stopped seeing her previous therapist. Initially, her therapy was for work-related issues, but somehow it shifted to focus entirely on our relationship, as that was the therapist's main interest. She never told her parents why we broke up and has since started seeing a different therapist. I just listened. She turned the focus of the conversation back to us, promising that I would have complete control. I'd manage our finances, have access to all her devices, be able to track her movements, and any property we owned would be in my name. She said she'd do whatever it took for me to trust her again. She listed even more promises than I can remember. I couldn't understand how she thought that would lead to a healthy relationship for either of us. I asked if she cheated. She said she had opportunities to cheat but never acted on them. I believe her, but it infuriated me. What does she mean by having the opportunity? In a committed relationship, you don't put yourself in situations where such opportunities arise. You shouldn't even want those opportunities. It's like saying, I had the opportunity to kill someone today. Why were you even in a situation where that was possible? Calling it an opportunity makes it sound like something desirable. That pretty much ended our private talk, and I told her it was time to speak with our parents. So we did. I asked both our sisters to leave because this was not their concern. My sister protested, but I held firm. Our family isn't easily swayed by minor tempests. I explained everything that had happened, detailing the therapy session and my decision. I didn't mention the recording, as I never needed to. To my surprise, my ex confirmed everything I said. Her father's eyes welled up with tears, which broke my heart. Her mother asked if this was the way they raised her and demanded an explanation. My ex repeated her story. Stress at work, depression, therapy, the therapist's focus on our relationship, and how the therapist convinced her she might lose me unless she leveled her sexual experience to mine. She said my reaction snapped her out of her slump. She quit her job and is looking for something less stressful. She promised she'd do anything to win me back and started crying again. My ex brought up the journal once more, insisting that if I read it, everything would be made clear. She claimed she wasn't on board with the therapist's ideas, but went along because the therapist was an authoritative figure with experience. When our parents looked at me, I said that I don't usually read private journals unless they're written by a famous deceased poet, a remark that didn't land well. I was trying to hint that I didn't want to read it because what's done is done. They all looked at me as though I'd wished death upon my ex. You could feel the hostility in the air, so I conceded and promised to read it. You win some, you lose some, and sometimes you say the wrong thing and lose even more. My ex is now seeing a new therapist, an older gentleman with a white beard like Freud. I looked him up online. He's married, attends conferences, and has written a few books available on Amazon. He seems reputable. Can you kids work this out? Was the next question, which made me angry again. It's as if they thought this was a playground disagreement, and we just needed adult guidance. We're old enough to decide for ourselves what constitutes a betrayal we can't recover from. We've been together for 9 years, 5 of which as a couple. Even if her behavior had legitimate causes, how do you just go back to the way things were? This wasn't a reset. It fundamentally altered my perception of her. She feels like a stranger now. I still find her attractive. She looked incredible last Friday, and I can't deny that. But it was also calculated. The hair, the dress, the perfume, all chosen to appeal to me. The journal now sits on my nightstand. I haven't read it, and I doubt I ever will. I skimmed through it to confirm it's genuinely a year old, and it seems authentic. I don't see what good reading it would do. When people ask why the wedding is off, I simply say we had an irreconcilable difference of opinion. Her sister might spill the truth eventually, as she's very close to her mother, and then everyone will know. Our parents want us to meet again next week. They told me to read the journal, saying it might help us start fresh. They think she's still the same woman I fell in love with, just going through a rough patch. They believe I wouldn't be so dramatic if I didn't still love her. Their words, not mine. I'm not sure if I'll go. Damn, she did look amazing. Finally, I want to thank the community for their support and guidance. It was enough to help me figure out a plan of action regarding the therapist. A big thanks to those who provided useful resources and advice on what steps to take.